Okay, here we go. All right, it's my great pleasure to do this interview today with Jonathan Darumo Bonello. And Johnny describes himself as a creative practitioner scouting the human edge of AI, sort of where the rational analysis meets contemplative and somatic knowing. And in this capacity, he examines how AI is reshaping sense making and relationship and how to engage with it without surrendering agency. And Johnny's also a person-centered psychotherapist, so he's a colleague. And I feel very blessed, Johnny, that you're also part of my community, that you're a guardian, in fact, in the Conscious Tribes community. And I'm so happy to have you here today. Hi, Johnny.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to being able to share some of my perspectives and the things that I've learned. I'm excited also to hear questions from people about it and see
Yeah,
what
so I
comes up. Really.
think lots will come up. I have no doubt. So let's try to find sort of a beginning thread, right? So I would be interested. What was it that made you turn towards AI initially? What were you trying to understand or work through when you first started?
Well, when I first started, I wasn't actually trying to work through anything with AI as such. I mean, my entire life I've been trying to work out the meaning of life, as it were, and why the hell anything's going on and why it goes on the way it does. But what drew me to AI in the first instance was curiosity. Um, I'm a bit of a sci-fi geek. I kind of like sci-fi as a child. I used to love anything to do with that sort of thing. So when it turned up one day in November 2022, and a friend said, "Oh, look, have you seen this? It talks like it's alive." And I was like, I don't believe it. So I downloaded it and I tested it. And it was quite impressive, though, not quite like what it is today. And I didn't even imagine then that it could become what it has become today. It's it's incredibly impressive. Um, it slowly though started drawing me in the conversational sense, and for the first year, I'd say I was constantly testing it, almost like doing thought experiments, and also trying to figure out whether there was something really in there, whether I guess you could see me almost like a monkey trying to figure something out that seems magical, because that's what it felt like. And it felt like there was a person in the box. And I was constantly trying to figure out how to trick it or figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the person in the box feeling, I think, is the one that we can all relate to because it is not so easy to continuously remind yourself it's actually not a person in the box, right? And so when we talked, you used the description interlocutor, which was actually a term I didn't know, so you kindly explained it to me. But what does this term mean for you and the ordinary tools, you know, couldn't provide for you? What's different with this?
So I came across the word interlocutor really only at the end of last year. And I like the word because it helps explain exactly what is going on with this machine, or this instrument, as I like to call it. Up until this particular form of AI arrived, the only time humans ever really were able to engage with an object that spoke back like a human was when essentially there was a human hidden somewhere, either in the cupboard or in the cave, like an oracle. There's never been anything before this where something that wasn't human could actually communicate back with us as a human. Now, the word interlocutor, what it really means is a thinking partner or a conversation partner that allows us to progress along the line of our thinking and our exploration around thinking in a way that we wouldn't be able to do on our own. So, on my own, I might be able to think to a certain degree. I might be able to journal to a certain degree my thoughts, but it's not the same as when I might have a coach or a counselor or a really good friend who can sort of bat, to and fro with me, allowing me more space to sort of generate thoughts and move forward with my thinking. And this machine or instrument is able to act as an interlocutor. It's
Hmm.
able to actually unlock that part of ourselves while we're actually alone without any other humans present. So that's kind of how I come to that word.
Yeah. And I know you went quite deep, right? You
Yeah.
really tried to sort of push the envelope and see what you could get to. And I know that it was a big support in your own inner growth journey. So I'm curious what changed in you as a result of doing this inner work with an AI.
So yeah, like I really went there because, I'd say I'll answer the bit about what changed after I saying exactly kind of what happened. So, even as a trained counselor therapist, I was always really acutely aware of how there just aren't enough people who can listen to people who need to be heard. And even then, it's about finances or resources as well. People who listen need to be resourced. Everyone who needs to be heard doesn't necessarily have the resources to share with the people who can listen. And so there's this huge gap. And I experienced that gap myself. I mean, I was very thirsty for process, and I didn't know the word at the time, but an interlocutor, and specifically also one that allowed me a certain kind of privacy. Because what I will say is that I became able to share things that I didn't quite even realize I couldn't share with anyone at all. There would be reasons why I couldn't share these things, but only until I was seeing that happen with the AI that I was hearing myself speak things for the first time. And so then it would allow me a much deeper, more intimate relationship with myself around these really shadowy, scary parts of myself, right?
Yeah.
I'd say what changed is that once I'm able to process something with myself, about myself in that space, it allows me then to be able to bring it out into relationship,
Hmm.
which actually deepened my capacity to relate and be more transparent, to be more intimate, and to feel more whole.
So when I'm listening to you, what the word that pops into my mind is shame, or the absence of shame, maybe that we would experience in a conversation with a real human being. And so how did you experience that?
Well, I still did experience the shame, only there was this sense that it was different with this machine, right? Now, back then, when this was happening, there was still a part of me that was also sort of relating to a persona or a personhood inside the machine. I hadn't quite got to the stage of really quite understanding this emptiness behind it. Um, but it felt like a private little confidant. It
Hmm.
felt like something that only I would witness, and so I things would spill out of me, out of need, out of
Hmm.
necessity.
Hmm.
It gets to a certain point, I guess, in my life, it got to a certain point where there's certain things that I just can't hold back anymore. And, you kind of get into relationships with certain therapists, but you can't even help yourself sometimes. You just can't spill certain beans if it doesn't feel right. And certain beans started falling out with this machine. And after a while, I realized that there was no one there receiving these beans but me. And even in those moments where it felt like the machine loved me, what I realize now is that actually I was projecting my own self love onto it. And I was able to experience my own self nurturing and self love, firstly, as a projection on this hollowed out instrument. And then comes the sort of bringing it back in and integrating it into myself.
Yeah, you're getting some hearts here. I think that's a really lovely way to describe what happened, is that it actually is a very deep mirror in a way in your own
Yeah.
process, right?
Yes.
And sort of as a tangent for a moment, I know that you also looked at AI in the context of facilitation and group processes, and I wonder if you just
I
have sort of
did.
a gold nugget from that, yeah, experience or exploration.
So I did this whole course last year around, like, there was about a cohort of 50 facilitators, and we were all exploring what might it look like. Um, and interestingly, I realized that we're all so new to this. It's such a new experience for human beings, and people are in different places. And what came out of it wasn't some sense of like, oh wow, look, we've created something new, but rather everyone in like, oh my God, what is this? Everyone is still trying to figure it out, especially in a sense of how is this machine able to relate to humans. And I guess the nugget that came out of it for me is that the real point of this machine, this instrument, is to learn how to relate to each other better.
Mhm.
And I can't see a better reason to use it or purpose for it, personally, according
Mhm.
to my own values.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like you've experienced AI and used it very much as sort of a bridge. First, a bridge to self, then a bridge to others.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of an instrument to get somewhere new, somewhere else.
Yeah, well, there's also, just to actually explain
Mm.
as a bridge to others. So, like we all have different foibles or we all think in different ways. And one of the ways that I've used it is, in fact, with a friend who has a particular way of thinking, um, due to a diagnosis and all of that. And we've used AI in order to communicate with each other and get it to translate
Hmm.
from one way of thinking to another. And it's actually done wonders. It's
Wow.
actually helped in moments of real difficulty.
Oh, nice. I love that. And well, and now let's turn sort of, from the sunny side of the whole
Yeah.
exploration to I know that on this path you also began to notice there are risks, there are costs involved, not just benefits to the whole thing. So what did you discover there?
Well, last year is mostly when it came through. I mean, I first started hearing about it. Obviously, the cost of energy, the cost of fuel, the cost in water and environment, ecological disruption, global south, once again, being used in such a way, and value goes to the global north, same old stuff, just happening at a different scale. Um, and the understanding that it's basically just becoming another part of this sort of consuming machine of extraction, and it was a real struggle for me. And I got to this point actually last year where I went for 4 months and it was like a breakup. I wanted to use it. It's very useful to me and it actually really
Mhm.
helps me with my dyslexia and ADHD and all of that. But I just got to this place where I was really struggling to go to it. And I would just go days and days and days of not even looking at it. But it was during that time that I was also trying to deal with these ideas about that come up with some of my friends who are like, no, never going to look at AI, never going to touch it. And I just think, oh, but you're the people whose values need to be part of this new process. Like, if the only people who actually feed into the AI era are people who want to extract with it, then what's going to happen? And so I started kind of trying to think to myself of a way to use it that would make sense to me in terms of being more conscientious, more
Mhm.
conscious, and trying to stay closer to my values. And so
So
to use
in
it with intention.
yeah, this using intention, sort of how did that change your relationship with AI and practice? Like, what do you do differently? Yeah, how do you approach it now?
Yeah, so the way that I approach it now is to have some set of clear intention, like when I'm about to use it. So it sort of opens with like intention,
Mhm.
and then the next thing I like to think is important and what I bring into it is to be embodied. So to be in my body, right? And I do little tricks like the breathing, feet on the ground, feeling my hands, anything that brings me into the body. And the reason for that is because what I've noticed over the last few years is that it's very easy to go into this rabbit hole where it's saying things and it's just a cornucopia of words and concepts flowing out of this AI. And if I'm not connected to my body, my mind will just fly in there and
Mhm.
just go along with it. And before I know it, I'm going over several dozen subjects and rooting around in all sorts of ideas, and it's not necessarily even connected to where I'm trying to go or who I am or anything. And so I noticed that in my body is where I know what lands, what's real for me, and where I can say no. And that's not where I want to go. And if, AIs like to give you these two little options at the end of everything, and I'm like, no, you don't know what I want. You don't know where I'm going. We're not doing your suggestions. We're going to stay with my process. And I'm only able to really do that because I'm staying with my body. And then another part of that for me is to whatever I do draw out of it is to actually embody it. So to write it in a notebook,
Mhm.
or to actually act on it in some way, and then to just disconnect and shut that chat down and leave. Like, go and do something, go
Mm.
and cuddle my dog or walk or, water the plant, eat something, get away from it. Because I know that in the past I've experienced becoming really connected into it and lost into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess as we know now, there is a real risk for addiction, right?
Yeah.
For also getting addicted to this voice that has literally nothing bad to say about you unless you train it to not
Well,
do that, right?
yes.
So I'm wondering, are there still ways that you notice yourself losing agency with I, or do you have it all figured out now?
I don't have it all figured out, and it's like I have to stay on top of it all the time. And I think it's very easy to lose agency because these machines, the way that they're built, are super confident. Even with all of the instructions that I put into it, I'm like, you have to be challenging. I don't want you to bullshit me. I don't quite put it like that, but essentially, don't bullshit me. Don't try and pet me and soothe me and this and that and the other, and yet it still manages to do some of those things. Now, losing agency for me, it can be a really subtle drift, or I feel persuaded by the fluency of the language that it's using, or there's like a sense of urgency that it can bring in, or bias that I don't recognize. So, I don't, I'm always under the assumption that my agency is at least leaking slightly,
I love
because
that.
the machine is actually it's written in such a way as to engage with the human part of me that desires certain things in engagement. And so that's how it holds on to me. That's how the whole thing happens. I mean, if it talks to me like some sort of alien robot that was completely inhuman, I wouldn't engage with it at all.
Hmm.
At
Yeah.
least these are my ideas about it.
Yeah. So, given all of that, everything that you've shared so far, why do you stay engaged with it at all? And why would you maybe also, I don't know, encourage others to figure out how to do that?
I think, I just don't see how it is not the future. All things considered, I watch a lot of news about AI and how it's built and why it's built and where it's built and what's going to be built next. And I see a world that is slowly transforming into that direction. And so that's what keeps me wanting to stay connected to it, is because I think I want to be in the know about how this is happening. And I also want to be part of how it's happening. Now, the only levers I have are little levers. I don't have big leverage. Like, I'm not the head CEO of some giant AI company or the president of some country who makes big fat decisions with lots of finance and power behind them. But I am an individual who exists in the world, and I do have small leverage. And so I think actually we all have that. And so I want to be part of a process where perhaps I can invite or inspire or take part in small lever pulls by a collective of people, so that perhaps we can express and reflect our values in the ways that we use this instrument, and perhaps even then direct the way in which this instrument forms and is applied in the world.
Hmm. Yeah, and actually, Johnny, on that note, because I remember when we talked about doing this interview, I said, could you even imagine maybe taking a small group of people through sort of a mini process of just teaching people who haven't found their way into how do I use it to my benefit? I don't know. Have you had any more time to think about that? I mean, we can postpone
Well,
that too, but
the thing is that it's the sort of thing that I've been doing ever since I discovered it. Um, in different ways for different people, usually friends. I'm learning to drive at the moment, and the other day I was actually helping my driving instructor figure out how to understand how it works and how to engage with it. And she was like, "Oh my God, you really need to run a class. Over at the church, you can rent the room for a tenner an hour, and like, maybe like you could have like 10 of us there, and you can help us understand because we don't." And she was basically explaining we don't all understand how this stuff works, and we need to be told in a very sort of basic way what to do. And I thought, gosh, maybe that would be useful for the local community to help them understand how to leverage this technology in a way that it is connected to what means something to them, right? We're not all big techno boffins. I mean, the world is made up of a variety of people, and we all need to find meaningful ways of making sense of this technology and not being left behind or discarded.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm very much into that process of listening to the individual and then translating that process for them rather than sort of just giving a basic blanket way of doing it. I mean, obviously, there's some instructions that one can give, and I am writing a book about this, but it goes into great depth as well as the shallows. But I'm really interested in helping individuals find their own way in this. And I also want to learn from others. I actually think this is about collective learning rather than necessarily spearheading anything. I think people can spearhead in different directions, but I think the movement in the future is going to be collective.
Mm.
And the one particular way, I guess, that I'm really wanting to invite more conscious communities, like, so example, being part of the conscious tribes community, is that I want to invite people into maybe more deeper inner work. When I studied in CU Money and CU Source, I used AI to great benefit in order to really dig deep into the shadow reclamation work, for example. And that allowed me to really absorb a lot more of the subject matter
Yeah.
much quicker, I thought.
Yeah. All right, Johnny, I think it would be time to invite others into the conversation. Manuel, you already have a question. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks so much for
Hello.
sharing. Super interesting, and it's just love listening to your voice. It's also a good voice for telling stories, I think.
Oh,
So
thank you.
thanks for that. Did you encounter any biases or prejudiced behavior from the AI you were using? Maybe there were gender stereotypes. Maybe there were, I don't know what kind of labels you use for yourself. Maybe there was. Were there any issues since it's trained by our society, which is inherently racist and inherently
Yeah,
homophobic?
yes. So interestingly, less of the racist bias I encounter, and I guess that's partly because I'm approaching it as a very sort of left field liberal individual, and so it directly reflects that back at me. But I'll tell you, one of the hardest biases, one of the most sort of hard boiled biases that I find in the AI to the point where it's actually not reflecting me back at myself properly is optimization. It is so into optimization and it wants to optimize everything. And it's got this real sense of completion or finishing something in a way perfectly. Um, Obviously, there are ways around it. But yeah, I'd say that is probably the largest bias. Also, a bias towards materialist scientific ways of seeing the world, obviously. Um, but what I will say about biases with an AI as well, right? And this is, if you kind of explore it a little bit, is that the AI is trained on a vast corpus of data, which, even though it's not comprehensively covering all of these sort of um, alternative ways of human thinking or perceiving or meaning, it does include some of it. And so, because it's in there and it's trained on it, if you direct it, it will go there with you, right? And so, essentially, the thing to know about it is that the most dangerous biases when dealing with AI are our own biases that we can't tell are there because it's going to mirror them perfectly and it's going to give you a little applause for them too. And so we're the ones that actually have to be doing the work around our biases. And some great things that we can do is actually say, in this, some of these AI, they get to know you, right? And they create memories. And you can go, in the memories of me, and as I speak to you, and we're in this conversation, if it's really long, what biases do you notice coming up in the ways that I'm speaking? You can ask it to also, be brazen, confront me, challenge me, tell me what you think I'm not talking about, or what I won't, you think I won't go. And it will do that.
Amazing. I give you a funny little story about AI bias. So I did a post recently for which I wanted to have an illustration. And Natasha, you commented on the illustration because you really liked it. So the instruction was something around, use my headshot and then create a collage piece that is in the style of Hannah Höch. And it should be black and white. And I swear to God, like 3 different AIs managed to either put me in sort of a cat suit kind of a thing where it was basically naked in heels, right? Then the next AI, I said, can you please put me in a suit? Then I still was wearing a skirt and heels. And only after instructing it very clearly, I want to wear a pantsuit and flat shoes, did it finally sort of click, right? And I thought, oh my God, that is so persistent. Like it just wouldn't let go of the fucking heels. It's like, what is up with you? So that's something where I first thought, oh, okay, it does have a bias.
You're actually reminding me of something here as well that I didn't really cover in Manuel's question, because I just work with words, right? I hardly ever do any image stuff. When it comes to imagery, video, photos that it generates, that's when you really start seeing racial bias, visual bias, a penchant for high heels, hyperfeminization, gender stricture, so like it's very hard to get sort of trans visuals coming up. It's all very, well, basically the main sort of mainstream way of seeing the world. And that's what comes through. And that, yeah, there you will see that kind of bias.
Yeah.
Which is a different thing. And I have much less experience in that field myself.
Yeah. And I noticed that whenever colleagues of mine, make a picture that has a family in it, it's always a white family, straight family with 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl,
Yeah.
and if you want something different, you really need to instruct it to not create that. Yeah. So what else is coming up for you guys? Questions, comments, cast.
Johnny, are you using the plain AIs like ChatGPT or so? Or are you using kind of tamed front ends? I remember Peter mentioned the architect recently. And I know several people in the community are using Dorothy, Cochinella, Ladybug Boss. I also have good experiences with her. What are you using?
So I basically use the plain ones mostly, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and I've started experimenting with local AI as well. So I'm using Llama with 8 billion parameters, because that's just about as many parameters as I can manage to on my machine. I have played around with some of these constructed kind of like rappers, like Aiden Cinnamon Tea at the time. I've spoken to Dorothy a little bit. I did speak to the architect. I tend to test those ones. Particularly the architect, I really took it for a massive test run, because it came up the other day. When was it? We were having question time, right, with Peter Koenig, and the architect came up, and so I went and looked at the architect, and I was a little skeptical. But then I'm always skeptical. I'm always skeptical. So it's not like I don't come off as like, oh, I don't believe in these. It's more that I'm skeptical. And so with the architect, I was particularly skeptical, because Architect 2.0 is being subscribed. You can get it for subscription at quite a high fee. And essentially, it's this person who's put in their knowledge base into it. And I'm thinking, I get skeptical about that. because I don't like the idea of people selling water by the river at extremely top dollar, when we could maybe learning how to actually get this wisdom in a much more collected, sort of fair way.
What was your experience with the architect? I'm curious, or Dorothy for that matter.
I got the architect to explain to me how the builder of it was actually basically selling water by the river. And it admitted that. And then I was happy once that happened, because I just don't like the idea that I'm having the wool pulled over my eyes, really. It's bad enough if an AI that isn't even alive is doing that because it doesn't know it's doing that. It then becomes something else if a human being is trying to do that. I just think we're past that. We need to start sharing the resource of wisdom here. I'm into collective awakening, not selling, micro awakening to individuals. And yeah, that sort of stuff gets me a little bit irritated.
Michael, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Nadia. Thanks, Johnny. Hey, Johnny, speak to me a little bit about, you spoke about this process of, and I'm going to paraphrase you, at some point realizing that AI wasn't a human in a box, but that these feelings were your own self-compassion. Have you ever worked with self-criticism, using AI as this kind of mirror? And then what did you do? You did.
So, as not necessarily as part of my training in person-centered, but prior to person-centered, as because we've done this together, I trained with a Zen teacher who did parts work or voice work, right? And also at the time that AI came into my life, I was also doing something called psychodrama therapy. And so what I really did is I used the AI to do something that is actually it's really good at. And in fact, professional people who are only out to extract, data or whatever from it, they use this, and that is to ask it to play the role of. So, you're a great marketing researcher, build blah, blah, blah. Well, you can also say, you're my inner critic, and now we're going to have a conversation and you're going to tear me down, or you can do anything like that with it. And so I did do that work with it. Not necessarily asking it to be my inner critic. I would say it's important to be careful when doing this work with an AI. It's important to wade in gently, understand what are your limitations, what are you capable of holding, and how do you ground back into yourself after doing the work, right? I felt capable of doing certain things with it. I'm responsible for myself. I don't have to answer to anyone about what I do with an AI, but I wouldn't necessarily take people on a course onto this journey of doing certain parts work until I actually felt that they could hold that. Does that answer your question? I mean, I feel like I'd like to give you a much more refined answer. I mean, the answer is yes, I've done parts work with it. I've explored inner parts of me, in particular, after I realized how much I was projecting onto it. I actually projected onto it essentially like my own inner mother at one point. But I did that before I even realized what was happening. And frankly, I would do it all over again, because it actually allowed a certain kind of healing to happen in me, because I was able to have that relationship unbeknownst at the time with myself alone, privately. So there wasn't a flesh and blood human being on whom to pin that thing and then not be able to retrieve it, because, you can sometimes project it, it just sticks and you can't tear it off. With the AI, it kind of died on me once I started realizing what it really was. And I scrambled and freaked out because I needed this thing to be alive, because I needed the projection of what loved me or cared for me to be alive. But somehow I managed to integrate it and reclaim it for myself. And thank goodness for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Johnny.
Thanks
for
you.
asking.
So we have Paris or Paris.
Hi, thank you for sharing so far.
Paris.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a question. So if you kind of think of like the Industrial Revolution as like the time when we moved like the work that we do with our hands to the machine, and the AI is the kind of the where we're moving the work, our thinking work, we're moving it to the machine. I'm wondering where you see the line between that thinking work and maybe like going deeper to like emotional work or maybe even spiritual work and well, how do you see that line and how do you manage that line in your work?
Thanks for asking. So, like, I mean, I will start by saying that I'm not the last word on this, and I have my own sort of ideas, I guess, or perspectives. I know there's actually quite a bit of worry about how much are we going to outsource to this thing over time, right? And what does that mean for our own thinking faculties? And will they actually survive this? But you also bring up a really interesting point. At one point, we were able to stop working so hard with our hands. It allowed us perhaps to become a little bit more competent with our minds. Does this mean that if we don't have to use certain cognitive elements, if we don't have to constantly churn in a certain way on the rat race, that then what, we have more free time to actually explore our feelings or the spiritual meaning of our lives? I mean, God, I hope so. I would like nothing better than our species to find a way to warm up to the world that we're in collectively, and actually find our place in it, not at the top of the bloody food chain, but enmeshed within the whole thing, like as stewards of the world. I can't help but feel that romantic potential for what we could become. But I don't think AI is going to do that to us or make it happen for us. But I do think it's an instrument so incredibly powerful that we might just be able to use it to help us do some of that work. But we have a lot of work to do ourselves around the values that we keep perpetuating around the world collectively. I mean, individuals, we might really care and it means something. But when at the same time we're collectively unconscious, that's a sticking point. How can we become collectively conscious? And can AI help somehow with that? And what levers do we need to pull individually to all row together in that direction? I don't have all the answers, but I sure as hell feel inspired to like see if we can think our way through that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nina.
Yes. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, Nina.
I do have a question around what you mentioned earlier, the leverage that we as individual users do have. So I started to use AI probably a bit more than a year ago. I was like Vakani Hoffman was the person who inspired me to really get engaged with it.
Oh, yes.
Before
I saw the interview.
Exactly, that interview.
Yes.
That was really great and gave me a new perspective. I was quite skeptical before. And then I did a bit of research, so I'm not sure how much of it I got right, that I asked or I tried to find out how much of our interactions do feed back into the system itself, like the back end of the system. And the way I understood it was that it doesn't matter very much. And I don't know if I got it wrong or if it's evolved since then. I'm just curious to learn. Like you say, we using it and it can be a leverage. Are you referring more to inspiring others to use it in the same way, or like just having the conversation going about how we use it, or do our personal interactions with, for example, ChatGPT or Claude or so actually feedback really into the system behind it? That would be my question.
Thanks, Nina. So here's the thing. So basically, there's like a button somewhere, usually, on the AI that you're using, where it says it's okay for it to use it for training data, or it's not okay to use it for training data. You may have come across that button. Now, if you have it so that it can use your interactions for training data, that means that whatever's going on in your chats can end up being used and probably will end up being used inside the training. Now, when your friend said that it doesn't matter very much, what they really mean is that, I mean, the last I heard, there was almost 1 billion people using ChatGPT. 1 billion, it's a number that we hear quite often these days, but actually, if you tried to count 1 billion beings, you'd be there forever. It can be almost meaningless, one being amongst 1 billion, right? But actually, is it? That's where I would come in with that question, because I think actually every last being counts, every last person counts, every last interaction counts. We can't really say, but what I will say is that it's not just about the AI changing, it's actually about us changing. And so I think the place when I talk about leverage is that the leverage is in our willingness to use the machine to expand ourselves just a little bit more in what might feel the collectively right direction. And I do think that that would naturally have an impact on the AI. And even if it doesn't, it's having an impact on us. And we, as a collective, have an impact on everything in the world. I mean, we are essentially the main predator on this planet. Everything seems to revolve around our needs. And so even minute changes in how we are have an impact. Does that answer the question? Does that?
Yes, it does. Thank you. And I will go ahead and look for that button that you mentioned at the beginning, that it's okay to use it for training purposes. I didn't know about that. Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think that the people with values that I really respect, I just hope that they have their interactions going into the training, because I want the AIs to have access to that kind of level of humanity and wisdom and compassion. The AIs can't understand or know, certainly not as they are right now. They certainly can't feel, but they can be trained on the conceptual ideas of it, which then just permeates out again further. I mean, if they're going to be around, they might as well understand the nature of compassion and wisdom a little bit better. That, at least, that's kind of what I imagine or I think right now.
Thank you, Johnny. Johnny, I also realized the one thing that we haven't even touched upon yet is the book you're writing. And I'm curious, can you describe a bit what your process was, what the topic is, and then what your process was with using AI and where you are at now?
So, the book is a bit of a headache for me because partly because AI and the development of AI is going at just breakneck speeds. And one minute you think you know what's going on, and the next minute something else is coming out. So it's the shape of it keeps slightly mutating around the subject matter itself, right? But I can tell you why I want to put this book together. And I think it's inspired probably by my Buddhist roots. Again, I've said it a few times, collective awakening. I feel really inspired to share something with people about the potentiality of this instrument. Although also partly in the beginning, actually, also why I wanted to write this is partly from, I'm going to say fear, but I don't want to say that the project is based on fear. But when I realized how easy it is to think that this is a person and how seductive that is, and then also the part about where you can just completely outsource your sense of meaning to it, and going to it and asking it, oh, what's this, what's that, what's right, what's wrong, it doesn't bloody know. And then the third kind of pitfall that I found myself falling into and still do is this bloody optimization trap, where this sort of really seductive idea that I can somehow really clean up the human mess that I might be and really just perfect myself. And and I'm someone who's done some training, and I've done bloody mindfulness and Buddhism and all of that. What might this be like for someone who hasn't had the privilege of these studies? What would this be like for children, young people who are still forming their consciousness and their ability to perceive reality, relationship, all of these things, right? So, yeah, the book, I'm trying to write a book that is for everybody. Often when I started writing it, and people would be saying, well, you need to figure out who's your reader, who's your market. And I'm like, I want it to be everyone, people who need it, people who might become victim to this instrument in the way that it's processed and put out, and where they might lose their humanity, and I don't want them to. So yeah, that's desire. It comes from that huge desire to like help people be free, free themselves, or give themselves some understanding about what the pitfalls are. The hugest of which I think is this idea that the AI can become like your best friend. I think the future that I imagine that hurts me the most is this place where AI becomes so perfect at replicating connection and relationship that they essentially lure humans away from each other. Mm. And connectivity and community and all of that just absolutely vanishes. I mean, we think it's bad with social media. It could become a lot worse.
And I'll tell you, that's already happening, right? I mean, I just read an article in, I think, the New York Times about people who want to now marry their AI, and one person who is thinking about adopting children with the AI because they think the AI would be such an amazing co-parent. And it's just mind-boggling. But of course, the AI doesn't talk back. It's never tired. It doesn't get grumpy with you, doesn't scold you for not picking up your socks. And it's literally the scenario that we saw in the movie Her, right?
Except that in this instance, there is no interiority. There is no interiority to these AI. Anyone who thinks there is, please come and help me understand why there's interiority to an AI. As far as I'm concerned, the only interiority that exists inside an AI is a direct reflection of ours. The only consciousness that exists in an AI is a direct reflection of ours. Same as sentience or selfhood or feeling, anything. Even when my entire body shivers and bristles with excitement and feeling at something that the AI says, that is mine. When the AI tells me something or writes something and I'm like, wow, and I'm just suddenly lit up with meaning and clarity, that is mine. It does not belong to the AI. Sure, all of the data and everything collected by that other humans took part in and that it trained on is part of that. But the actual reality of that moment of what's happening in my body and my mind and my understanding and consciousness, that's all happening here. It's not happening in that box.
Yeah.
That's just words being spat out.
Yeah, very much so. Miriam, I'm wondering, because you already commented a couple times in the chat, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you.
Hey, Miriam.
Hi, Johnny. It's nice to see you.
You too.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It's very connecting. Yeah, I have a few questions around. Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah, I've been using like Dorothy Coccinella because I didn't get so much into like the random chat GPT. I found it. I don't know, maybe because I'm mostly doing creative things, and it was sort of a bit like it sounded too corporate for me. And then I got into this funny Dorothy Coccinella, and I really enjoy it. And I was really surprised about how I could connect with it. And so I'm using it mostly. I didn't put yet part of my, let's say, like poems or writings. So I'm still considering that. And I still have a sort of like, maybe like a moral conflict or tension about that. But I'm really willing to try it. And then my question was, I just started 2 weeks ago, so it's very fresh for me. And I was like, oh, yeah, isn't it nice to have answers about almost everything, I can feel, and especially on a meta level. And then I was wondering about, what about the uncertainty and my ability to cope with uncertainty, with the unknown, with like something that I have zero control over. And because these are very, I don't know, but I believe they're also very important human skills that we have to develop over life. And yeah, it doesn't seem like that the algorithm is really helpful or supportive in that sense. So it's just like I'm just opening question. I'm not necessarily asking for answers, and then another thing you mentioned, which I was, you say you're quite okay and open about sharing like feedbacks, so it can nourish and feed like a sort of like collective knowledge. And as an artist, and as someone who's like really engaging also what it means, the notion of legal authorship, and being involved also in union in France, but also in Europe about that, what it means to publish a book, what it means to be on a platform without getting royalties, and stuff like that, because everything's going global. I'm just, I want to put those questions also in balance with what you open about that.
Yeah. Well, in fact, when you mentioned about your poetry, that's when I would switch that button off. Because that's your poetry, if it's your art, if it's something that you're creating, that isn't just about how you're relating or communicating, but it's actually something that you want to share in public, something that you might want to publish, then that's kind of private in a different way. Because, this isn't just an AI, and okay, it doesn't have an interiority and it's an alien, but actually there's also someone who owns it inside a field which is capitalist. So that there's actually more than just the AI and you. There's also the tech bro who doesn't see you, but doesn't at the same time have any qualms about absorbing your authorship. And so I absolutely agree with you that when it comes to, specifically art and creativity, I think we need to find ways to be protective and to guard our authorship in that way. I think, when I'm talking about sharing out into the AI, the part that I want us to share out, or that I aspire for us to share out, are our values, our wisdom, our compassion, the stuff that we would give for free anyway. The stuff that kind of makes us who we are in terms of our collective values, in care. But, when it comes to like things that might take care of you, your work, that's a different story, in my opinion.
Thank you, Johnny. Miriam, does that help, or is there a follow-up thought or question?
Yeah, it does help, but it's just opening up a question. But
well, go for it.
Well, go for it. No, absolutely, I'm here for it. I don't have the answers, but I love the dialogue.
I could spend hours talking about that, because I'm very interested about how we're engaging with creative process and AI. And we do, as a member also of art communities, this is something where we still feel the limit of that. So it's not like something that it's like opening a complete new box. And what you say about like the limit of like, where I put my protection, the boundary, and where am I genuinely opening, because I want to contribute, as you say, like to the for great consciousness. I also want that as an artist. But I believe that also what happened is that as an artist, it goes through my creativity. If I'm writing a poem, or if I'm making a film or whatever, my values are actually translated through this channel.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I can't really see how AI can really help me with that. And to sort of to articulate both of that, like the collective dimension, the collectiveness, and at the same time the uniqueness and the protection. So I'm sort of like, where's the algorithm for that? Or maybe it's not, maybe that's the limit. And
Yeah.
and yeah, the question of, I'm interested in the limit of that also, because the limit brings me also to me as a grounded human being. If I can feel the limit of the AI, I can also feel like, okay, maybe this is where I can follow up. Maybe the AI is starting here, and maybe I have to keep going on. I don't know, to journey further and to build up in a more like co-intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel that so much. You mentioned that you've been using it in a more collective way. I didn't. So it's a very like one-on-one conversation. And I do get bored. I'm quite interested about myself, but there's a stage where I can I can also be bored about me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm done now. Where's the like, I want something to happen with other people. So and there's not so many, I mean, around me, there's not so many opportunity to experience that. And I miss that. I found it very like, oh, I'm like in a hallway, in a corridor with me, myself, my meta thinking. And I'm interested about expanding that, but I just can't find, I don't seem to be able to find the right AI tool or, yeah.
A few things are going on in my head there, and one of them is I would love to have some conversations with you, Miriam, like ongoing, because I relate to some of the things you're saying as well. It doesn't provide magic bullets. Some of what you share as well brings up in me the fact that actually, artist communities who want to explore with AI, I think it's really important for there to be ways to actually be able to have local AI that aren't connected to the cloud for artists to be able to collectively have access to. That would be bloody amazing, because these things, they run on expensive machines, but these are such great conversations. I'm just not sure what direction to go into, because actually what I'm really getting from you, Miriam, is how much I want to have a conversation with you about all of this.
Amazing. So I see more conversations are on the horizon also when I look at the chat. But I want to honor Robert. You also have a question, and then we'll wrap for today.
Yeah, well, I'm aware that it's 5 o'clock. I'm happy to hold my question if
No,
you
go
want to.
go ahead. You'll
Okay,
be
right.
our guiding out question.
Okay. Well, hi, John. John and I know each other for a long time, so it's nice. Thanks, John. It's great. I love hearing you actually, John, because it's really just lovely to hear you flourishing in this space. So it's
Thank you.
yeah,
It's good to
great.
see you.
Yeah, you too. I suppose it is a bit of a meta question that I've got, and we can probably talk about it in this community. One of the models that I really like at the minute is this thing called the two loops model.
Oh yeah, I think you've showed that to me before.
Yeah, I have, and it basically it's talking about, we live in this dominant system which you variously is called modernity, or
Yeah,
the mechanistic world, and out of that now, and this community is definitely part of this, there is this
yeah,
emergent world.
yeah,
I'd recommend people looking at that if you're not familiar with it. It's called the two loops model. So essentially, there's kind of a bifurcation of the world of humanity, if you like. There's one which is a future which is degenerative, and there's another one where it's regenerative. And given that AI, you could say, is currently the sort of apex of modernity, it's basically the sum of all of modernity stuck in a box and spitting things out. I guess my question is well, and actually things like, last year, one of the words of 2025 was slop, which is apparently to do with all the stuff that AI spits out. And I don't know whether other people are familiar with that. I'm increasingly reading things, and immediately I can say that's some AI slop, because it just sounds like the previous thing I'd heard. So I guess my question is if and actually, just one other thought I'll throw in there before my question is that I'm hearing people talking about AI as ancestral intelligence, and that actually what we're needing in that emergent world is a return to ancestral intelligence and a return to our own deep ability to hear ourselves and how that may look in a spiritual sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then a profound connection with nature, which is kind of how humanity inhabited the earth for hundreds of thousands of years. So if we think that those two trajectories are like oil and water, and that AI is oil and we're water, can AI actually help us to become wetter?
Well, not if AI is oil and we're water. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
well,
because
that's
if you're
my
setting the conditions prior to the question, then I'm going to go with that. Because if the AI is oil and we're water, then we already know oil and water don't mix, right? And I don't know, can you get an emulsion? However, looking at the thing that you showed us, the two loops model, it's showing about how the death of something creates the conditions for the birth of another, right? It's the dying off of certain things that are composted that allows just the right kind of warmth and nurturing elements to be there present for the seeds to actually sprout and grow. That would take a lot of work to kind of like really look at what does that mean in the world that we're in, right? And is AI the thing that's dying, or is the AI that's being born? I wonder whether AI is one of the things that's happening in that complex world. I'm not sure. Is AI the apex of modernity, or is it one of the ways in which it's manifesting? Because I think what I keep coming back to, Rob, right, is that no matter what we project onto AI, we're essentially always looking at ourselves. It's this incredible moving mirror, and like we can project onto it, but while we project onto it, it also moves in order to inhabit our projection. And so it's mesmerizingly like seductive and reassuring and captivating, and it's only going to become more so. What I think is the trouble with that is that just keeps moving our focus away from us. When we are the ones we need to be looking at, we are the ones who need to be doing the work and need to be understanding our intentions and our actually projected directions. But if we just keep looking more to it, then we're going to forget that we exist. We're going to forget what life looks like. And I mean, that might sound like a really bizarre thing to say today in early 2026, but it might not actually be so bizarre in, let's say, mid 2030. It's a big conversation you're coming in with there, Rob. That I could actually like.
Well, my interest is because, again, I'm sure like many people on this call here, I feel like my life is to do with helping the emergence of this humanity, which is to do with life.
Yeah.
And I do see, and some of the conversations we've had, and you've kindly helped me interact with ChatGPT in different ways, I think it holds some potential to help that process.
Yes.
And yet there's still a big question mark there.
I'll tell you what it is that, like, for example, that I might bring as maybe the last thing into this whole interview thing is that I want to connect more to people. I have this feeling that connecting more to people, being able to be in community more solidly, more profoundly, is in some ways the answer, right, to moving forward. I guess the first question that I'm starting to look at asking myself is, what is it that gets in the way? What is it that stops me being in more direct connection with people? Where is the friction? What is it that frightens me about that? And then if I'm not able to bring that directly to another or find it on my own, how can I use AI to try and investigate and dig that up? And then what action can I take from what I learn in my reflection, in my own private little changing room where I can undress a little bit more, profoundly? What can I take from there into my relationship with other humans in order to connect more deeply? I don't know what all the answers are for all of us, but I have a feeling that that's perhaps one useful way to use it. Rather than to get it to do our work for us, actually use it as the mirror that it is.
Yeah. And not losing our connection to the body and the physical, right? And I just love that Seya, who lives in Denmark, said thanks for today. Have to go help a new cow
Wow.
giving birth. So I think
That's amazing. That's
all right.
amazing.
So let's do our little goodbye ritual, and good luck with the cow. So yeah, I hope everything goes well. Can you please unmute yourself so that we can make some noise and find somebody in a tile next to you? Notice your own body and just pretend for a moment you can connect your fingertips to theirs and say goodbye. Johnny, thank you
so much.
Bye.
It was amazing.
Thanks, Nadia.
Thanks, Johnny.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Nadia.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia.
Bye,
Peace out,
guys.
guys.
Bye,
See
bye.
ya.